Hi all, it's Ziv from Elementor. In this tutorial, I'll go over margin and padding basics and show you how they can be used to build creative designs just like the one you see here. As you most likely know, margins and paddings are used to create space between elements and directly impact the layout as well as the look and feel of your site. Creating a natural flow for the user to navigate through the content is important, especially when looking to increase conversions by guiding the visitor down a page. Therefore, it's important to know what these two properties do and how they affect your design. There are important differences which we'll go over in this tutorial, and once you understand them, you'll be able to make better design decisions. Let's make a start. We will be working with this section, which has two equally sized columns. I've set the section's height to fit to the screen, and the column position is set to middle, so the columns appear in the center. This will make things easier to follow during the tutorial. There are three widgets in the right column: the heading, text editor, and button widgets. Let's drag an image widget into the left one. As you can see, there already is some default space between the image and the column. We'll get to that in a bit. For example purposes, I'll refer to the image widget as the element, and the actual image as the content, just to keep things clear. Let's start off by giving the image widget a border. This will help us see how the margin and padding properties behave. The border surrounds the element's content. Next, in advanced, I'll add some padding. As you can see, it adds space inside the border. Padding is used to create space around the content, inside the defined border. This applies to widgets, columns, and sections alike. More on that soon. You can see that padding grows the element's size and shrinks the content inside, and vice versa. Padding goes around all four sides of the content, and you can target and change the padding for each side. When the values are linked, all sides get the same value. To set them individually, simply click to unlink them. I'll decrease the padding on the right a bit and increase the left. Linking them together again automatically sets them back to the 70 pixels we set before. The border surrounds both the padding and content. Let's give the image widget a background color and see what happens. The padding is affected by the styling of an element, such as the background color you see here. Now let's give the image widget some margin and see if it behaves differently. It adds space outside the border. Margin is used to create space around the element, outside the defined border. Also, margin isn't affected by the styling of the element, such as a background color, but it is affected by the styling of the container it's in this case the column. Let's give it a background color so you can see. If both background colors are the same though, things can get confusing, especially when designing without borders. By the way, it's important to know that in the editor, the section, column, and widget handles and outlines aren't the borders. As you can see, the margin we added to the image widget appears inside the blue outline of the widget. This might be confusing at first, because when we remove the margin and the padding, they seem to be the same. These principles apply to columns and sections as well. Let's give the column a border so you can see. Heads up, things might get more confusing before the penny drops. No worries, at the end of this tutorial, you know the ins and outs of it all. Let's also add some margin and padding. As you can see, it behaves the same as with the image widget. Okay, so let's recap what we have over here. This is the image, which is the widget's content. Outside it is some green padding. It's green because of the widget's background color. The pink border separates the padding from the margin, which is purple because of the column's background color. The column's padding and the image widget's margin seem to be the same because of it. And lastly, the column's margin will get the same color as the section's background. Don't panic if you're still confused. I'll show you some more examples so things become crystal clear. Now that we know the basics, let's reset all of the styling and go over some practical applications for using margins and padding. Soon, we'll check out the mobile responsive settings as well. Like I mentioned before, you can see that there's some space between the image widget and the column. Elementor adds this to keep things organized by default. Let's remove it so that the image widget takes up all of the column space. Pop quiz. Is that the column's margin or the padding? Well done, it's the padding, because it's the space inside the column's defined border. Let's unlink it. As you can see, all values are set to 0, so no padding is set, allowing the image widget to fill up the space. I'll go ahead and select the image for the design. Now, let's see how margins and paddings can be used to position the widgets in the column on the right. Often, the same visual layout can be achieved by using margin and padding. So, when do we know what to use? As a rule of thumb, margin is used to space an element in relationship to other elements on the page. For example, to create space between the heading, text editor, and button widgets, we can add some margin at the top and the bottom of the text editor widget. Padding, on the other hand, is used to create distance between the content and border of an element. This way, we can adjust the appearance of the element itself, just like you see when we add some padding on the right over here. It's important to note that for beginners, using margin and padding can be confusing, because both are parts of your element, even if you don't include a border, especially when the section, column, and widget backgrounds are the same color. By adding a border, things start to clear up a bit. Let's add one to this text editor. We can see that the border surrounds the content, which is the text. And now the top and bottom margins we added to the widget are easier to identify. Also, by adding a background color, we can see that the margins aren't affected by the element styling, but the padding is. There are many creative ways to use paddings and margins, so keep these basics in mind when playing around with them. Let's remove the background color and border. And back in the advanced dropdown, check out the margin and padding. These responsive handles indicate that the values also can be adjusted for tablet and mobile devices. Currently, they are set for desktop. Let's enter the mobile responsive mode and see how the margin and padding behave. As you can see, they are left blank, indicating they inherit the larger device's settings, which in our case are the values we set for desktop. Let's first get rid of the padding on the right. By unlinking the values, we reset them all to 0. Then simply add the desired padding for mobile. Same goes for the margin. Unlinking removes the values inherited from the desktop. It's important to make sure you check all padding and margin settings on desktop, tablet, and mobile. And remember, if they are left blank, they will inherit the larger device's settings. Okay, we're almost done here. Just a few more tips to see how Elementor can be used to help you make better design decisions. I'll go ahead and delete the text editor widget. And instead of using margin or padding to position the heading and button widgets, I'll enter the column settings. And in layout, set the vertical align. There are many options to choose from, so make sure you check out the dedicated video I've linked in the description below to understand what each one does. For this example, I'll set it to middle, so all widgets in the column automatically vertically align to the middle. Lastly, if you want to position elements outside their container, you can use negative margins. They allow you to move widgets and columns above or below other nearby elements on the page, which can improve your designs when used accordingly. Let's say you want to move this heading widget to the left a bit, outside the column, so it overlaps with the image in the column on the left. All you need to do is add a negative margin to the left side of the heading widget. As you can see, the content moves towards the left, onto the column next to it. Let's also add a background color. Likewise, adding a negative top margin to the image widget, for example, moves it upwards. A good example to use this technique is to improve conversion rates by breaking up straight lines. This way, visitors will see the image first and know to keep scrolling down the page. This only works for margins though, because negative padding would cause the border to collapse into the content, which in turn would make the content area smaller than the content, which doesn't make sense. Let's add some padding though to increase the space around the content. Like I mentioned earlier, tablet and mobile responsive modes automatically inherit any negative margins you set for your desktop designs, so make sure you check them when making mobile edits. Another thing to pay attention to when using negative margins is the z-index. The heading widget automatically appears on top of the image widget in the column on the left. But what if your design requires something else? By adding a z-index value to an element, you can make sure it appears on top of another element. So let's say we want the image to appear on top of the heading. All you need to do is go to the Image Widgets Advanced tab and in z-index adjust the value. I'll set it to 1. You can use these z-index values to layer different elements on top of each other. The largest value will appear on top. Note that this can be done for widgets, columns, and sections alike. For example, if you want the heading to appear on top again, simply go to the Heading Widgets Advanced tab and adjust the z-index value. I'll set it to 2. It appears on top because it's the larger value. Okay, let's complete the design. I'll increase the font size a bit and align the button to the center. And that's it. Now you know what margins and paddings are and how they affect elements on your site. Use them together with other Elementor settings, such as vertical alignment, negative margins, and the z-index, to create your own stunning designs, just like the ones you see here. Like always, have fun playing around, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more tips and tutorials. Ciao for now!